Aloha, everybody. This is Dave Wallace, and I'm coming to you from my home in Wahiawa. And good morning. This week, I'd like to share with you one of the things that I became very sensitive to and learned how to recognize from my early time in my life. And this ability is the ability to sense cancer. And the origin of this is pretty sad because it started off when I was about 8, 9 years old. And I remember one time talking to my dad, and I says, my dad was asking me how come I was kind of like staying away from my grandpa, his dad, that was on Molokai. And I told my dad that grandpa smelled funny. And he kind of like backhanded me and like, it's not something that you say about your grandpa. And, I didn't know how to explain to him that I was sensing something happening to my grandpa that made me feel uncomfortable. And as a 8, 9 year old child and stuff, I'm trying to explain that to your dad. I was very sensitive, yeah. So he scolded me, and we just didn't understand what was going on at the time. Fast forward several months later, this odor that I began to smell got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And eventually, not only I could smell it, but a lot of other people that were around him could smell that. I had 3 cousins that were adopted by my grandparents who were living there in the home at that time, and they endured that, for the rest of my grandpa's life. Anyway, after the smell became more detectable, my grandpa went to the hospital, went to go see the doctor, and doctor diagnosed him with cancer. And after that, it made perfect sense. What I was sensing. Not only did I sense the smell, but also whenever I was around him, I would feel drained, like energy would be sapped out of me. And coming away from visit my grandpa, I would feel really, really tired and worn out, like I've been playing all day. So this drain on energy and this particular odor that accompanied this disease is something that I became very aware of from the time I was young. Once the disease, once once my grandpa was diagnosed, I remember my dad getting together with his 2 sisters that lived on the island, and they'd come over to our house and they would talk, and they spent a lot of time trying to figure out how my grandpa got cancer. And for me, being the quiet one, and I was allowed in on a lot of these conversations simply because I would hide behind the couch while everybody's talking, and they look at me. My face would be buried in a book, and they think I'm not listening, but my ears were wide open. So while my dad and my aunties were discussing, well, hey, how did Grandpa get cancer? One of the stories that I picked up from these conversations is that it seems that my grandpa was a stone cutter, and I remember when we were little kids running around. My grandpa made poi pounders, and he made a lot of poi pounders. In fact, he used the poi pounders to keep the doors open in the house. He put the poi pounder by the door, and it was a door stopper. And a lot of these poi pounders were all around the place, and he would be shaping poi pounders and cutting poi pounders, and interesting is that a typical Hawaiian, right? You make a lot of stuff, beautiful things, and somebody come and visit your house, you give them to them. So we had a lot of missionaries, Mormon missionaries, that probably went home with poi pounders, and guests that came and left with poi pounders. But as far as our family and stuff, we never got a poi pounder from Papa. Anyway, Grandpa was a stone cutter, and listening to my dad explain, while Grandpa was working for the state was working on a project that I'm not too sure what it was, but while in the midst of working on this project, they came across a stone that refused to move. Some of you folks probably heard these old stories about a sacred stone where people try and move the stone. They move it with the bulldozer. The next morning, the stone come right back. Well, this is the kind of stone this was. And so they're looking for someone that could break the stone and get rid of the stone. And my grandpa, he's actually from Maui, and they were transplants to Molokai. So I don't think Grandpa really fully understood the nature of this particular stone. So he agreed to cut the stone. And while he was cutting the stone and breaking the stone apart, and he hit the stone, a chunk of stone flew out and nailed him on the cheek. And it stung him, and it hurt him. And from that point on, that particular spot on the cheek became a sore spot. It bothered Grandpa for many, many years. Ironically, that same spot is where the cancer started. Yeah, the cancer that he had was in the face, was in the nasal passages. And I remember growing up as a child and stuff, my grandpa always carried around a handkerchief, and he was always kind of like blowing his nose, like trying to clear his sinus. And so that explains a lot. So this cancer started on that spot, and it grew, and it eventually got really, really bad. And every time we went to visit my grandpa after he was diagnosed, we knew he had cancer. The home was filled with a really foul odor, very uncomfortable to be there. And as a child, I never wanted to go down because of the way the odor and the energy made me feel. So eventually, Grandpa did die. In fact, he agreed to have a surgery up in Rochester, New York, and he died one day before my 11th birthday in 1964. So that's my experience with cancer. Interesting thing after my grandpa passed away is that one day we were down in Kaunakakai shopping with my mom and dad, and I passed by this one man that I could smell the same thing I smelled on my grandpa, and I could feel drained. And this older man, I knew him, and so when I talked to my mom, I says, "Mom, I think the man over there," and I pointed at him. I said, "I think the man has the same thing that Grandpa had." And she looked at me, "Stop it already." Well, eventually and stuff, this man did have cancer. And this is something that, in my practice as a medical intuitive, this ability to recognize people who has cancer has helped me not only help people find out if they have cancer. A lot of people are afraid of cancer, and if they think they have cancer, they're very afraid. And I've helped a lot of people who thought they had cancer and scared. And when I visit with them, I sit down with them, and I don't feel nauseous. I don't feel the energy draining from me. And using my ability to see and look into their body, I said, you know what? Put your fears away, calm yourself down. You don't have cancer. And sure enough, when they go and check with their doctors, no cancer at all. So this is a kind of like a sad ability because of its origins, but at the same time, it's helped me help other people. And this is Dave Wallace saying aloha, and thank you for watching me today.